How's everyone doing? Today I'll be doing a video on the top 10 most underrated horror movies on Blu-ray. Now these aren't the best horror movies, these aren't the best horror releases, these are just the top 10 horror movies that are underrated, that are out on Blu-ray. You know, underappreciated, underrated, some ones that maybe are lesser known as well. And as with every top list, this is subjective, so definitely let me know what you think of my choices and what choices would be on your list for the top 10 most underrated horror movies on Blu-ray. And let me know if you've seen these movies as well. But now let's get on to the list for the top 10 most underrated horror movies on Blu-ray. And the number 10 spot is The Bogans. Now this is just a cheesy 80s creature feature, but the cast has great chemistry. It's a popcorn horror movie that you can just really sit back and enjoy. It's about a small town in Colorado, and they're working on this mine, and they basically use some explosions and to open up the mine a little bit more, and then after 100 years they release the Bogans. And you don't really see the Bogans until the very end of the movie. You see a little quick part of the Bogans, and you see little things from its perspective, but you don't really actually see the full creature until the very end. And the creatures themselves are, like I said, they're cheesy. It's 80s cheesy creature features, but this one is definitely one of the more entertaining ones out there like that. It's a lot of fun and highly underrated. And my number 9 spot is Babysitter Wanted. Now this basically plays out to be the typical babysitter being terrorized kind of movie. It's kind of a throwback to that, but this one has tongue firmly planted in cheek. It's entertaining, it's funny, it's got some good suspense and tension. It's a lot like House of the Devil, but for me, this is everything that House of the Devil wasn't. House of the Devil had great, you know, an 80s vibe to it, that feel to it, but that was really basically about it. There's a lot of build-up. There's about 40 minutes of build-up in that movie that just really didn't do anything. It was just the girl walking around the house, and then the payoff just really wasn't worth it at all. Now this one is the complete opposite. There's a lot of build-up and suspense, but there's actually things going on, and the payoff is excellent and definitely worth it. For me, this is way better than House of the Devil, in my opinion. I know I'm probably going to be in the minority of that, but that's why I feel this movie is very underrated. It's a great low-budget satanic cult movie, and I love the twist to it. And the babysitter goes on this secluded farm to babysit this little kid, and the parents are away, and she starts getting these phone calls, harassing phone calls, and then crazy things start happening, and she has to fight to survive, and there's a twist, and it's awesome. And more people should check this movie out. It's a great babysitter being terrorized satanic cult movie, and it's definitely worthy of being on the top 10 underrated horror movies on Blu-ray list. And on my number 8 spot is Bedevilled. Now you might notice the length of my hair has changed. I filmed a video already, and then I went and got a haircut, and I saw this movie, and I was like, you know what, I don't care, my hair's gonna be different, the continuity is gonna be off, but this has to be on the list. This is a Korean horror film, and it just blew me away. So intense. It's about a young woman living in Seoul, and she takes vacation to a remote island that she grew up on as a little kid where her grandparents lived. And this island is called Mudu Island, and it's very undeveloped. It only has one phone on the whole island. It's a very small island. You have to wait for a boat to go there, and it takes a while to get there and get back. And so she goes there, and she sees this woman that she used to be friends with as a kid. Used to be her best friend as a little kid, and she sees that the woman is being abused by her family, and she's being abused emotionally, physically, sexually, and the other woman basically wants her help to go back to the mainland and get off the island. And if she doesn't get help to get off the island, she's going to have to take matters into her own hands. And it's just a very slow build-up. It has great dramatic pacing, which I think really works well. And that last like 35 minutes or so is just totally gripping and crazy and intense. It's just a beautiful film. It's tragically beautiful, great cinematography. I love the final shot of the film as well with the island, and it just shows, you know, that kind of small town mentality and just the brainwashed effect of abuse and just a continuation of that. And all the actors play their roles just perfectly. You really feel strong emotions towards the actors. And the lead actress, oh, she was phenomenal. It's brutal, it's tragic, it's disturbing, and it's one that'll really stay on your mind as well. And being stuck on the island really gives you a claustrophobic feel, and it makes you really root for the lead actress as well. And there's a darker hue to the movie that really works well for the tone of the film. The knife scene really sticks out in my mind, and the progression towards the end of the film is just devastating. This to me is a modern masterpiece. It really mixes the drama and the horror extremely well, and this had to be on the list for the top 10 underrated horror movies on Blu-ray. Bedevilled. And in my number 7 spot is Splinter. Now this is one that really caught me off guard. It's a low budget movie, and when I first saw the beginning of this movie I was like, oh, this is going to be cheesy, and it turned out to not to be cheesy at all. It was very thrilling and suspenseful. It's basically about this parasite organism that attaches itself to a host person and turns them into this grotesque, like, splintered person with these like oily black splinters coming off of them, and they can't control themselves, and they end up attacking other people, and they have all these crazy movements and jerky movements, and I really love the contortionist movements. And it's basically about a young couple who's being taken hostage by a criminal, and they all end up hiding out in a gas station. They're trying to survive the night, essentially, because the parasite is all outside. It's infected other people, and they're trying to get in and bang on the doors and shatter the doors and try to get to them. And they're just trying to fight to survive and not become the next victim of this splintery parasite. And in my number 6 spot is Hell. This is a post-apocalyptic movie, and one of the better ones out there of recent years. This really is honestly a modern post-apocalyptic classic. Along with The Road, this is another one that really works well. It's really dirty and dingy. It has that same kind of washed out, darker tint to it that The Road has, and it's very fitting for this one. Even though it's bright, it's a lot of brightness going on, there's also a lot of, dirty, washed out look to it as well. And it's basically about the ozone layer being depleted and the sun just scorching down and just burning away all the forest and all the crops, and animals dying out and not being able to survive. Water's a scarcity, becomes a valuable commodity, and people are just paranoid. They don't know who to trust. There's not a lot of survivors left. Of course, there's going to be some cannibals, and there's going to be people that try to take advantage of other people. So there's a small group of people that are surviving and trying to find a place to live and carry out with the rest of their lives, and they're just basically trying to fight to survive and not die in this tremendous heat. So basically, when normally at nighttime we're being like the 50s or 60s, now it's unbearable. It's in the 90s, and even hotter during the daytime. It's so hot that they have to wear like protective clothing so they don't burn up. Their skin will just burn completely up, and they'll just be singed by the sun. And it's just a really gripping post-apocalyptic movie, and a really dirty look to it, and it really fits that feel and that tone of the movie. Great suspense and great thrills all throughout. And on my number 5 spot is Stakeland, and this is a post-apocalyptic vampire movie. There's a vampire epidemic that spreads throughout the country, and basically there's not a lot of survivors left, and there's a small group of survivors that band together. There's Mr. right there on the front cover, and he's kind of like the leader taking down some of the vampires, and they basically have to fight to survive through all these vampires. And there's also a religious fanatical group called the Brotherhood, who's just as bad as the vampires. They're very twisted, and they're just killing people, and they have to fight all that, and they have to get to New Eden, which is supposed to be this safe haven in Canada. And so they're traveling across the country to get through there, and there's small little bands of communities all throughout. And there's certain parts that I think are really cool and unique, like the Brotherhood. They take vampires up in helicopters and they drop them down in these towns. So they're dropping these vampires down in the middle of these communities, and the vampires are attacking everybody, and people have to try to fight them off to survive. And I really like the cast in here. Nick DeMiki, who's also one of the writers, Danielle Harris, Kelly McGillis, a few other recognizable faces in here. Everybody does a great job in here. And again, this is just a really downtrodden movie with that post-apocalyptic feel. The vampires kind of act like zombies a little bit with the way their movements are and the way they look. And it's really a creepy, unique movie. Very cool post-apocalyptic vampire tale. And it's also a unique take on the vampire genre as well. And my number 4 spot is Xavier Jin's The Divide. I'm a big fan of Xavier Jin's, and he really did it with this movie. It's basically a tale about a nuclear attack, and a group of people in an apartment complex, they go to the basement, and they all try to, survive and not be affected by the nuclear fallout, essentially. And they can't open up the doors, and they slowly turn on one another, and it's just a down spiral into the darkness of humanity. There's a lot of morality issues that go on here. It's like Lord of the Flies in a basement, and I love this cast. This cast is phenomenal. Everybody played their part just perfectly. Milo Ventimiglia, Michael Biehn, just everybody did a fantastic job. It's dirty, it's gritty, it's raw, it's riveting, and just the way that they spiral into madness. They're slowly losing their hair, and their teeth are falling out, and things like that, because they're trapped down there without any sunlight, nutrients, vitamins, anything like that. And they're being affected from the fallout a little bit as well. They just start turning on one another, torturing one another, and there's people are being killed and just beaten, and just the things that happen. There's a lot of psychological horror in here as well. Rosanna Arquette's character was also a really kind of disturbing character in here as well, and just what happens to her, her evolution of her character, and just their evolution of all these characters by the end of the movie. It's just really blew me away, and definitely a very underrated movie, very dirty and disturbing movie. And my number 3 spot is Eden Lake, one of the best British horror movies ever in my opinion. This is a modern classic. It's just about a young couple they're going on a vacation for the weekend, and they go to this secluded lake that's surrounded by these woods, and when they get there, there's a group of young kids there that are basically harassing them, and they start stealing stuff from the young couple, and they start vandalizing their car, and so they confront the kids, and then there's an altercation, and then the kids attack them, and then the young couple has to fight to survive, and also dealing again with the morality. Can you kill these kids? Well, if you're being attacked and stabbed and about to be killed, then you're gonna have to do what you have to do. Michael Fassbender and Kelly Riley did a fantastic job in here, as well as all the young actors as well, especially the leader of the young gang right there. Fantastic job, really believable character, and I love the ending shot too with him. And I like the mentality of the small towns. They keep to themselves, they handle their own business, and police their own. And I really like that they didn't cop out at the ending. It wasn't a typical Hollywood happy ending. This is one of those endings that's going to stay with you. It's just going to be on your mind, and it's very disturbing. It reminds me of old school Wes Craven. Last House on the Left meets the French film Them. And this Blu-ray release is actually the Dutch metal pack for Eden Lake, but just about every country out there has a Blu-ray release for Eden Lake except for the US. But Blu-ray.com has announced there will be a Blu-ray release for it coming up for the US. It's a few months away, but once there is a release for it, I highly recommend picking up the Blu-ray for Eden Lake. There's a lot of brutal, disturbing scenes in here. It's dirty, it's bloody, and just like that front cover, she's covered in dirt, mud, and blood. That's what this movie is. Very disturbing, and this movie has become one of my all-time favorite movies. And my number 2 spot is Michael Dougherty's Trick or Treat, one of the best horror anthology movies out there, one of the best Halloween-themed movies out there as well. There's all these different intertwining storylines that happen on Halloween night, and just kind of plays up the mythology of Halloween and the spirit of Samhain, and just the character of Sam right there is just awesome as well. He's become an iconic character in my opinion, and some fantastic performances from Dylan Baker, Brian Cox, Anna Paquin. The Anna Paquin storyline is my favorite by far. There's a lot of cool mythology here, and just a fantastic horror anthology. If you like Halloween themed movies or horror anthologies, this is definitely one to check out. It's entertaining, it's creepy, it's thrilling. It just has everything going on here with the intersecting storylines, and it's just awesome. And my number 1 most underrated horror movie on Blu-ray is 1972's The Horror Express right here, starring Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, and Telly Savalas. This movie is fantastic, just a classic train horror movie. It does have a little bit of a snowy setting, which I really appreciate as well. It's basically about an anthropologist that finds what he thinks to be a missing link frozen in ice, and he brings this missing link onto a train, and while on the train the creature thaws out and it goes missing, and they can't seem to find it, and one by one passengers on the train are being killed off, and they're trying to find the connection and trying to find the missing link, and the missing link is just pure evil, and it's just incredibly gripping and thrilling, and just the cast was fantastic here, especially the leads Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. For me, this is one of the best horror movies of the 70s. Very underrated, though. I rarely hear anybody talk about this one, and that's just a shame, because this is one that should be a must-watch for all horror fans, especially fans of 70s horror. It's incredibly atmospheric, and I love that sense of isolation, like they can't get off the train, and they're just stuck on there, and they have to figure out how to survive and how to save the rest of the passengers as well, especially from this evil creature. And you find out that the creature isn't a missing link, and that the missing link was just a host body, and that's this alien evil, and that it can go from host to host, and when it does, it drains your memories and takes all of your memories and intelligence and uses it to its own advantage. And then the host person starts to bleed from their eyes, so even creepier, and you find out that it's been around for millions of years, since the dawn of Earth, and you find all that out in a glimpse, and it's just trying to survive through all this time. It's been frozen, and now it's up against Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee and Telly Savalas, and they have to stop it before it takes over the world. This movie has great paranoia, great mystery, and it has a feverish pace that really works well. This takes place in 1906 at the Trans-Siberian Railroad from China to Russia. And there's also a Rasputin character in the film, and I really love that claustrophobic feel, that nowhere to run kind of feel being on the train and stuck there with this evil creature. And again, two icons of horror right there, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. Great to see them on screen together like this. An all-time underrated horror classic. So that's my #1 most underrated horror film on Blu-ray. So there's my top 10 underrated horror movies on Blu-ray. Let me know if you've seen any of these movies and what you think of them, and let me know what you think of my choices and what movies would be on your list for the top 10 underrated horror movies on Blu-ray. Leave me a comment or a video response down below. Hope everyone's doing well. Take care.